Times out of 10, it's an electric razor, but every once in a while, it's a dildo. Of course, it's company policy never to imply ownership in the event of a dildo. We have to use the indefinite article, a dildo, never your dildo.
I don't own...
The Tapeworm presents Glas, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano. A1, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano number 1. A2, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano number 2. A3, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Harpsichord. B, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano with a little help from my friend's rendition. A1 to A3, composed by Anonymous times 6, recorded at the UDK Berlin. B, composed by Anonymous times 1, Glas, Genesis Victoria, Harry Hudson Taylor, and Hayden Dean, recorded at the Collegium Hungaricum Berlin. Illustration 7-5. This twisted tape is a debauched, depraved, and perverse product of the tapeworm. Marla, Rain, and Tiramisu. TTW 163, copyright 2023, The Tapeworm. www.tapeworm.org.uk, www.thankyouforyourunderstanding.com. So, bit of a different kind of episode today in terms of like the format that we go for these shows. This is an incredibly strange and peculiar album that needs a lot of context for what's going on, I feel. An experimental release of process music released by the Tapeworm. What is the Tapeworm? It is an unusual cassette label that offers some truly bizarre albums, and this is the one that I picked up. Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano by Glas. A true what the fuck album experience of the most weirdest of processes, essentially. I don't think I'm going to be able to explain this one properly or even dissect it properly, you know, and the whole format is all screwed up for this, but whatever. It's weird music, weird albums, let's discuss it, shall we? So yeah, listening to the physical release of this, shall we? Well, I thought this one might be a fun one to dive into. It's genuinely one of the strangest instances of process music I've ever come across. You know, the album is twisted and demented, and it might be entirely responsible to the fact that there's this weird perverted element to the album. Like I said, I don't know how we're going to dissect this one. I think we're just going to kind of have to reveal reveal it on the process when the time is ready. We're just going to have to see how we go. So, musically, what does this sound like? Well, we can already hear, don't we? It's a little terrifying, truth be told, right? What we essentially have musically is the occurrence of rather atonal piano notes repeating over and over and over alongside the generated buzzes and clicks of these machines operating atop the very strings of the piano. Sometimes, from the pure random chance of everything occurring, you do get moments of musicality throughout, though they are very far and few between these rather extensive passages of just squelchy sound effects and vibrating hums. Like, the tape tells us very little about what's actually going on here, as to what's generating these sounds and what this process sounds like, you know, and going by on what we're just hearing, it's just a smorgasbord of these occurring sound sourced from the perverted piano, as in the titular perverted piano. But what makes it all perverted? What's going on? Why does it sound like this? And what are those black keys on the album cover? Well, the answers to such lie on the Bandcamp page. So let's just rip the veil off this entire thing. You know, we're looking at process music, so let's look at the process, shall we? The Bandcamp tells us the following. Glas, 1992, is an experimental composer based in Berlin. Through ephemeral compositions, Glas's work questions preconceived notions between the acts of passive hearing and active listening. In seeking to discover open-ended forms of music and pragmatic listening perspectives, Glas's compositions focus on the realms of subjective perception and cognition via the use of acoustics, psychoacoustics, and space as tools for sonic composition. His work has been exhibited and performed internationally, including the Portland Institute for the Contemporary Art, Glasgow's Radiophrenia Festival, the Soundwave Biennial, and the Zog's Institute for the Contemporary Art. He is currently receiving his MA in Sonic Studies at the UDK. Ben Glas writes, Anonymous Sextet for Perverted Piano is a conceptual performance piece that combines a traditional grand piano, 6 long-distance, remote-controlled, vaginal anal vibrators, and the prolonged use of the piano's sustainer pedal. The 6 vibrators were strategically and preparedly placed atop the strings of various grand pianos and one harpsichord, while random strangers around the globe connected to and operated the sex toys remotely. After the random and unwitting performers had befriended and synced up with a catfishing account linked to the 6 individual vibrators and controlled by 3 different smartphones, they then sent vibrational patterns and pulses to stimulate their assumed target. The then kinetic vibrators bounced, slid, and bopped algorithmically through the tonal possibilities that the piano and piano's soundboard itself permits. The piano's sustain pedal was held down throughout the performance, elongating the triggered notes and the good vibrations. All tracks on side A were performed by those unwitting performers, while side B's single track was performed with more than a little help from my friends. Anonymous 1, Genesis Victoria, Harry Hudson Taylor, and Hayden Dean. Ben Glas, Berlin, 16th February 2023. There's a lot to dissect here. This is the weirdest thing I've ever come across, I think. Like, I think this is the epitome of weird music, right? Like, what is this? What is going on here? So yeah, as we can now tell, this is a very perverted album, isn't it? Vibrators, pianos, unwitting participants operating these vibrators in some weird sexy catfishing game. It's kind of gross to think about, in my opinion. Like, something about it just gives me the ick. But what is essentially occurring here is this very bizarre form of process music, where the random act of the operation of these vibrators creates a moving object atop the strings of the piano that then plays the notes in such a peculiar and random way, generating for us this unique performance of randomly generated piano music. Weird and crazy, and the context behind it, of what is driving this music to sound the way it does, is weird and oddly creepy, I think. And perhaps that's fitting though, you know? When listening to the particulars of the music itself, so much of it is just these echoing, resonating tones, you know, that climb in and around each other, mixing in with droned piano notes, lowercase hums generated from the very vibrators themselves. Like, they are, the audible sound of them just vibrating is a part of the composition, you know? And themselves being operated in unusual ways that generates just a random sequence in of itself, you know? But of course, attached to this weird, super weird catfishing game where witting participants are engaging in some fetish thing, assuming it's part of some sexy time type thing, but it's not though, is it? It's got nothing to do with sexy time, does it? If instead it's just generating this music of sorts for us to listen to if you so wish, but why would you want to listen to this? Like, it's weird, and the context is what makes it so creepy and weird to me. I don't know. I'm gonna be honest, I'm stumped. I'm genuinely stumped by this. You know, I came across this album browsing the Tapeworm, stuff to listen to, and it's like, this sounds interesting, but I don't know what's going on. And listening to it, and having heard the entire thing, I still don't understand. I mean, I get it, as well as a conceptual art piece and stuff, it makes sense, but it's so weird, like, you know, the strange, you know, it's just very strange, and I think for me, it's that underlying sexual element, you know, that kind of just leaves me being very creeped out, you know, which is of course the very point of this musical journey, isn't it? You know, it's meant to make you consider the process itself, you know, the people behind it and the occurrences itself, you know, all linked together in this very weird, uncomfortable narrative. Weird though, very weird. You know, with the music itself though, you know, constantly occurring, overloading drones that navigates the weird section of sound occurrence, so going from musical to lowercase to cataclysmic overload, there's kind of, you know, different avenues being explored in different tracks, you know, especially when you do get to that third track though. You know, this is probably the only true different sounding track on this very album, you know, as, you know, all the other ones feature the piano. This one features the harpsichord though. You know, anonymous Sextet from Perverted harpsichord this time. And this one, I actually think sounds kind of cool in a weird way, because you're getting these weird low-end effects happening at times, alongside these lowercase clicks and constantly occurring instances of sound, and it becomes a smorgasbord once again, you know, of so much happening. But especially with the harpsichord pushing out these, you know, really horrible rattling vibrations across the very wood itself, it feels like, before landing on the strings and resonating them all in such a hollow, weird-sounding way. It becomes such a random assortment of occurring sounds, of course, but this one is the only one where I can place some sort of semblance of, you know, opinion on, I guess, you know, because it, you know, kind of has different textures, if that makes sense. It's weird to think about when you consider some of the vibrating elements, of course. Like, it's really weird to talk about texture and stuff, but of course, you know, it's of course the vibrators operated by random people out there. It's, you know, weird in and of itself. It's so weird. Anyway, the music though, you're sort of getting pulled into the state of hypnotization by the occurrences of all the sounds themselves. But then, like, especially with all the tracks, you know, you're just sitting there, you listen to it and going, huh, what's going on here? Then you kind of get lost in it a bit because it's just overloading you. And then you always get snapped back into reality when you suddenly consider exactly what it is you're listening to, you know. The fact that this is music occurred by people operating vibrators. Super weird. But it is an oddly unique little experience when you sit down and listen to it for extended periods of time, you know, being pulled between the two very states, you know, as you float from one to the other in a, you know, weird existential crisis, I have to say. It's also bizarre and weird, but at times I can't help but just want to know what the hell is going to happen next, if that makes sense, because it does keep you stuck wanting to know what's going to happen, what you're going to find out. let's move along. We technically discussed side A, but it's like it's also weird. Side B though. How was it described again? Yeah, I mean, this is the one with a little help from his friends, he says. So all the guest collaborators on this one, who. So I guess what's happening here is, you know, the piano and stuff. The collaborators are operating the vibrators, and just one person operating from afar anonymously. But anyway, I don't know, like, with so many randomly generated tones across this entire album, it is hard to dissect all the various movements, you know, especially, you know, the first two, for some reason, the first two tracks on side A. Harpsichord is easy because the instrument sounds different, but yeah, side B returns us right back to piano again, so it's difficult to dissect once again. So yeah, like I said, you just get the one catfishing victim this time. Operating the vibrators with no clue whatsoever, as well as the bunch of guest musicians all adding to the noise and chaos, you know. I think this one kind of feels a bit more melodic with the greater presence of the piano, it feels. Like, it does feel as intimidating as everything has done at first, but then before long it does navigate itself to a much sort of quieter passage where everything feels more minimal and yet still so procedurally generated. Hard to know exactly what all the collaborators are adding, but there's, you know, so many different occurring sounds on top of this one that, you know, you just imagine this very abstract, loose-flowing experimental electronic improvisation, maybe, you know, generating hums and tones to add to the miasma pushed by the perverted piano, of course. Like, it could be that, or they could have been operating the vibrators, or they could be operating other things. I don't know. It is what it is. In any case, you know, especially when this piano does suddenly, you know, come through with everything, it does create these weird, uncomfortable moments where you're just always looking over your shoulder, if that makes sense. And this one plays on for so long, it's very creepy and unsettling, you know, just inhabiting this very landscape, you know, one that is driven by the weird, creepy acts. So weird, though. It's very stupidly unique, I think, but maybe, yeah, this one's kind of the more fun one, because it's hard to discern what's occurring as a result of what, you know, with especially so many different guests on this one. But it does come across to me kind of like a super weird avant-garde lowercase improv. And once again, I'm just curious as to know where it's all leading to, where it's going to go, which is why I kept listening to this thing. You know, it's a cool thing about process music, to be fair. You know, just knowing. You know, where the process is part of the interest of the album, the results are always the most strange, unique occurrences of performances I have seen and come across. And this album just revels in just how weird and creepy it all is, especially on side B, where it just extends out the creepy vibes for just such an uncomfortably long time. But yeah, I just don't know what to make of this album. Like, when I came across it whilst browsing the Tapeworm and purchasing some cassettes just to review for the show, because you know, I've heard of the Tapeworm, never dived into the label. I thought, let's give it a shot. I think it'll be interesting. For this one though, this is one of the ones I came across, saw the name, and I wanted to know what's going on. My curiosity got the better of me, and yeah, I deserve it, don't I? So I'll be honest, I think maybe a joke has been played on me by Glas here, you know. So the way that the Tapeworm, the record label, works on Bandcamp is, with their current releases, it's a thing of offering up the cassettes for purchase, but no digital version for your Bandcamp app. Which is fine, but it does make reviewing this album a little bit tricky. So, you know, of course, the only way to listen to it is by listening through a cassette player. So what it does is, though, as a result, especially with the fact you can't listen to this on Bandcamp, it kind of hides the music. You don't know what it's going to sound like until you hear it through some sort of cassette player. And what you get when you do decide to purchase it, stick it in the cassette player and listen to it, is just, you know, this weird abstract experimental performance that's oddly perverted. Punishment for the curious. But I genuinely think the process is weirdly interesting. You know, it's so strange, difficult for me to wrap my head around, but it's interesting. And it's what makes the very music itself oddly fascinating to dive into, I think. You know, this strange process has resulted in an album that's so incredibly unique. For the right or wrong reasons? Well, that's maybe subjective though, isn't it? Like, for me, the weirdness of it all and strangeness, it kind of falls in line with the likes of South Winds by Christof Migone, an album we reviewed a really long time ago in weird music, where it's an album of lowercase clicks generated from flatulence, essentially. It's perhaps a little hard to take seriously because it's outrageous, but it does result in incredibly unique listening experiences. And it's the same with this one as well. These weird, unique listening experiences that challenge the way you perceive and understand music, or composition, or whatever you want to call it, and what goes into it, what the process is, and how that results in what you're hearing. And just how curiosity and stuff, how knowing exactly what's going in can kind of be a punishment, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, you just listen to this and you just hear some rattly piano and just wonder what the hell is going on. So, I think we're just going to end our episode of Weird Music there. As you know, difficult one for me to wrap my head around properly, and I don't know if I've done my best to explain this one at all, and the incredibly strange experience this album, but I honestly have no idea how to even approach this album in terms of writing about it and presenting it, so this is how it's come out. Let's just go with that then. But, talking about strange, unique music experiences is what I want to do on this channel, and this was certainly that. It's been a long time since an album has kind of just weirded me out to this extent. Hence why I thought I had to talk about it, even though it was so difficult to explain. So yeah. I do want to thank you for watching this weird episode then. If you've lasted this long, fair play to you. Yeah, the link to the album is in the description below, but of course you can't listen to it, at least not yet, because, there's no digital version available of this album. I will say though, sometimes certain albums from the Tapeworm do get released digitally and you can listen to them, kind of like the back catalogue stuff, so maybe that will happen one day, but for now, all we have is this very weird cassette right here. Super weird. So, yeah, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best, take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.